Hello and welcome to PhDear Diary. My name is Andy Salkeld and this is my video blog during my time doing a PhD at Leeds Beckett University. I believe this is week 20. It's either 19 or 20, somewhere around that, which means I've been in post kind of 5 months now, give or take. Started in February, and yeah, it's June now, so feels about right. It has been one heck of a journey so far, and I'm really enjoying it. It's very exciting. It's a lot of work, and it is keeping me very busy. And today in particular, I'm feeling extremely tired, to a point of almost like worn out exhaustion. And I think that might be related to the fact that it's incredibly hot, and therefore it kind of just drains you. I didn't sleep well last night. All these things are kind of creeping up, and they've kind of all hit at once, and so on. So I may come across a bit slower today, a bit less vibrant, shall we say. Pika is having a wonderful bath down here. Great television there, Pika. Thank you. And yeah, so that's where we are. What I've been doing this week it's been a bit of a complex week because I have now got all my questions for my first questionnaire and research study input into the Qualtrics online platform. So everything is now ready to work, everything's ready to be done, and I will need to go through ethical approval once this is all kind of agreed and approved upon, and then I will need to go through funding approval. So all these things need to kind of happen in order, and then I get to put my study live, have people do it, and then look at the data. So that's kind of very process driven. And where we are right now is very practical side of things. I'm not deep in theory right now. I've done a lot of the theory myself. She's just playing with the ball down here. You can probably hear it in the background. But yeah, so it's very practical. It's about implementing at this stage. And what I've done is I've got all that input onto the website where it will be done. I've built the research kind of the logic that gets attached to the questionnaire, which is great. And I've now provided it to my supervisor to review, input his comments, provide feedback, etc., etc. So kind of waiting for that. I've also started receiving comments back from various accountants who've kind of acted as a source of expertise to provide some form of external validation to the questions I'm asking about finance. And this has been really interesting because I've asked these people specifically, hey, can you provide me with any input on whether these questions make sense? Is there something I've missed? Should I be describing something differently with regards to finance? I am a finance professional myself. I'm a chartered accountant, but I don't want to just say what I'm saying is right. I want to make sure that the other accountants agree with me, which is great. That's very much... Sorry, I'm just going to move this because then I will more likely look towards the camera, which is what's important in this. But yeah, so... And they've started feeding back to me, which is great. I'm starting to get information in and adjusting them to make sure that there are enough selections. So there's various things that I have... that I'd missed out. So I hadn't included a charity part within my what sector does your organisation work in. I hadn't included a sort of Hospitality in their in events, so that's now being included. A couple of people have talked about the difference between where I say how closely do you work with finance and how often do you work with finance. And again, it's a very interesting question where some of it, where my intention is that one of them refers to the quality and depth of discussion. So that's the how closely do you work with finance. And then the other one is related to frequency. So for one of them, you might work through very intense periods where finance almost oversees what you do, but it doesn't happen very often. So it maybe happens once a month or once every 2 months, 3 months, but it's in incredibly detailed minutiae. Another one might be where a finance person sits next to you, regularly talks about finance, but it's all high level. You never really understand the finance or gain knowledge from it. So those are kind of, again, very interesting to hear the feedback. It may be that I drop one of the questions out and just focus on one part. I haven't decided yet. Again, it's something that I'm going to discuss with my supervisor next week. Then there's another one of the common questions that came about, or the common things that gets mentioned, is about finance directors and how should I be asking questions about the finance director as well as the finance team. And this is a really interesting kind of not dichotomy, but there's a difference between finance and the finance director, because the finance director comes with their own personality. They are an individual. They are a personality, and therefore that's very different than sort of the mechanical side of finance that I'm interested in. So what I care about is people's perceptions of finance and the finance team, or the financial process within the organization. I do think I will need to cover the finance director, but I think that would be more interesting within a qualitative point of view, because the finance director's personality will mean a lot more in the context of this than necessarily just people's perceptions of the finance director. It's obviously a sort of a strong character, strong leader. Like, let's just use some Myers-Briggs stuff. So I'm an ENTJ, which is extrovert, intuitive, thinking, judging. And basically it's kind of a commanding leader that solves problems and finds ways through and kind of sets pace. Finance directors like that will typically have kind of they will make a decision, it will happen, and then there will be and then it will kind of be commanded out, etc. But equally, there could be more introverted ones will approach things differently, and the way the finance director interacts with other parts of the organization, other leaders within the organization, is going to have a huge difference in the way finance is portrayed. But I can't do all these things in one single study. So what I'm trying to do here is almost say, look, I acknowledge it exists, but I can't start asking about your perceptions of an individual, because again, if I ask them to the perceptions of their finance director, that's not standard across, and there's even more personal demographics attached to the finance director than from the organization. At least in an organization, you can kind of simplify it down to say, well, what's the ownership structure? Does it have external investment? Does it have any of these things that make a difference? Whereas not only would there be perceptions of the finance director, there would also be, well, what's the finance director's traits? What's their socio-economic status? What's their kind of nationality? What more are they bringing into the role than just being the role of a finance director? So that's one of those bits of feedback where you almost just have to say, I hear you, but I can't do this in this one study. But it's something that I'm going to add in to, well, actually, this is an important part of it that I need to consider. And I think I will try to add that into qualitative research. So work with an organisation, assess the finance leadership within that organisation and people's perceptions of that finance leadership within that organisation. And then maybe look at that across different organisations and so on. So just something to bear in mind. The next bit that I found really interesting on the feedback was that when people read the vignettes, so this is 4 vignettes that display different values, cultures, and beliefs about an organisation. When people were reading these, they were almost trying to guess how I was separating them. So what typically happened is people would very correctly guess that one of the axes is kind of risk or change and so on. So an organisation that embraces change kind of accepts risk that comes with change. An organisation that doesn't is more kind of process static, etc. So most people guess that, and then in the majority of cases people were guessing that it's kind of an internal or external focus, which again is correct. So even though they have not necessarily studied the competing values framework, they can immediately pick up on what I am trying to portray. And that's really, I think financiers take a lot of these things kind of personally in a way, and therefore they try to understand what's being said about what they do. And yeah, so people are picking up on what I'm trying to have them pick up on, which is great from a kind of perspective of, am I describing these things correctly? Because I am, which is good. One person provided feedback saying that they didn't think the open systems vignette could exist in isolation. And I think that's very true. I think because of the way that I have to articulate the vignettes, people have to, you almost have to just emphasize one part of the finance team. In finance, you always have to do the day-to-day. You always have to produce the accounts, run through the ledgers, make sure everything's correct, that all things line up, except like that day-to-day has to happen. And I've tried not to mention any of the day-to-day routine things. However, what I imagine happens is because I'm emphasizing in some of the teams about budgeting and about process improvements, about internal controls, etc., I think what people are not misinterpreting, but what people are seeing is, oh, well, they're doing those things there. Does that mean they're not doing them here? And that's not the case. It's just that I am emphasizing certain aspects and de-emphasizing others. Maybe I need to add some phrasing around that finance still does what finance does. These are just some of the things that they highlight more often. But again, it's all been really valuable getting this information in, and I now kind of want to get the study out there, because it's very much like, right, I've got these ideas, I've got the kind of concept ready, I now just want to start figuring it out and seeing the results and so on, and being able to talk about it a bit more, because right now I can't really talk about it until people have seen it. And I can't start shouting about, oh, look, this is what I'm doing, this is how it's happening, until people actually are doing it, and so on. So waiting for a bit of input from my supervisor, also waiting for a couple more people to feedback on the questions so that I can make sure I've understood and reflected all comments. That's fine. I'm currently working towards the Psychology Centre PhD conference next week. So this is where all the PhD students that in psychology present what they're doing and so on, and it gives people a chance to talk about what they're studying, what they're researching, what they're finding out. Now, I'm only 5 months in. I have no actual data. I have no actual kind of outputs yet. So I don't have anything that I can really talk about so far. Yet I still volunteered to give a talk and a presentation on what I'm doing because I love talking and presenting on anything pretty much. So and because of this, and because I'm the new guy, I'm going first. So I am the first person presenting. I have 5 minutes, and I basically have to whistle stop talk literally everything I've done in 5 months on something that's new, that is relatively under research. So I'm having to very quickly kind of just jump at, like, right, here's something. And because it's like this, I've done what I always do, and I've just done a slide deck full of memes with very little actual context, with very little actual content on them. Tried to make reference to it, but there's just not enough. There's not enough time in 5 minutes, given what I have, to be able to do it justice. So I've just kind of gone, right, fine, well, I'm just going to talk about it. So this is what I've got on the background of this script, of where I am now. And basically, there's no good way for me to present this because I've only got one screen. So essentially, what I have to just kind of talk through, because I've got 5 minutes to go through this. So very quick introduction to who I am. So this is where I talk about who I am, because ultimately no one there really knows me. So being able to, telling them, look, I am a chartered accountant, I am a financier, I am a director, I'm an owner of a business, I'm a published author, I'm all these things, and now I'm doing this as well, and so on, to kind of say, look, this is who I am, this is why it's important to me, because work-life balance and the way we are affected by work is something that has massively impacted my life, and now I care about it. And that's why I'm putting my time, my resources into making this happen. Then I talk about a couple of examples. So I use the very typical example of someone leaving your department, them not being replaced, and then spreading the work evenly, and how that affects us individually, financially motivated decision, impacting individual psychology. Then I talk about how, then I do another example, which is about funding approval, where you put all this work and effort into something and then you get declined, and then you do it again and you get declined. Now, this could be pitching to win work, it could be pitching to have grant funding approved, anything like that. And sometimes finance says no. And that's a very hard thing to accept a lot of times, but sometimes it is. And again, finance having an impact on an individual. But why is it important? So my next slide is basically talking about burnout and how burnout has suddenly become a massive thing, particularly during COVID. We've been working longer hours, harder hours, and never switching off. And very much it is part of our life now. Then I talk about finance and its implications that we know about. So this is about a very quick whistle stop of financial shocks. So this is merger and acquisitions, corporate buyouts, recessions, the cost of living crisis we're going through at present. All these things do affect people, and they have kind of a similar shape of impact or profile of psychological impact as a divorce, although lower in magnitude. So all these things do have an effect. But I'm not looking at shocks, I'm looking at the day-to-day. What is the standard impact of finance? Is there one? Because maybe there isn't. And again, something very interesting to look at, even though we don't know the answers yet. Then I quickly talk about how I'm going to do it. So this is where I talk about things like, well, I'm using the competing values framework. I'm developing vignettes. I'm creating a measure of aspects of organisational finance and structural characteristics that are relevant for this. Then I'm going to look at mediators, climate, leadership, culture, structure, everything like that. And then I talk about some ideas that I have about, say, potential moderators, how I think financial knowledge has a U-shaped relationship, maybe negative parabolic, or hyperbolic, depending. It might have asymptotes, but basically describing, hey, look, when you have no knowledge about finance at all, you're kind of oblivious to it, and therefore you're probably not impacted by what's going on in finance as much as other people. When you have absolute knowledge of finance, yes, you may know that there's a crisis happening, but you may also kind of understand that it's peaks and troughs. That's what happens, and just because it's bad now does not mean it's bad tomorrow. But there's this scary bit in the middle where you know just enough to be scared, but not enough to feel the benefit of kind of understanding it. And I think that's why you'll see this relationship of kind of like happy here, sad here, and so on. And then I go into an Ask Me Anything, a very typical whistle stop. Look, once you've done Ask Me Anythings on the internet, you suddenly stop getting fazed by anything. So this is going to be an incredibly fast presentation that I just have to blast through. I've been talking through it here, and it's already gone on over 5 minutes. So it's going to be a very wild and fast-paced introduction that I'm just going to have to blitz. So I'm preparing and practicing for that. I was going to try and do it here today, but because I'm now running a single monitor just to record these, I can't have the second monitor up to be clicking through on, which means I can't have a second slide deck showing on here. There may be a way to do it, but I don't quite know how, and I don't really have the time to look into it to get this out and get everything ready to prepare. So I'm just going to be practicing. I'm going to probably write up some cue cards because cue cards make it easy, and then I'm just going to be kind of blasting through on the day. But 5 minutes is crazy. I suppose it's 5 minutes plus 5 minutes questions. So I'm just going to have to speed through and maybe detract some of the question time because I just have to do this. But it's really hard. Other than that, things are pretty good. I'm going to hopefully start seeing a personal trainer soon, which I'm excited about. I'm happy with the work I'm doing in general, so my general fitness, but I want to start toning and losing weight around my abdomen. I feel healthy. I feel fine. I have done more exercise in the past kind of 5 months, 6 months since the new year than I have done in probably the 5 years prior to that. But I think because I am losing weight in other parts of my body through doing exercise, it is now making my stomach look bigger. Or I am just putting on weight around my stomach. Either way, that's what I want to address. I want to get my stomach and my bum more in profile. And yeah, that's kind of it really with that. I almost painted up an entire Nighthaunt army in a weekend. I only have 10 more models to do. So I'm very excited about that. I get to play Age of Sigmar now, just in time for all the rules to change. So it's kind of a fresh introduction to a new game. Try all those things out. So I'm excited about that. And not this weekend. This weekend I'm spending with family a lot. It's Father's Day on Sunday, and we have a family barbecue tomorrow. But yeah, outside of this weekend, I'm then seeing different friends over the next couple of weekends, which will be really nice. I know I need to book Pika in to the vets, but I always stress about these things, and I need to kind of do one thing at once. So I will probably do that today. I'll book her in, but sometime after next Wednesday, once I've done the whole the presentation thing, because then I can kind of crack on with it and get everything done. And yeah, just running through in my head all the things that I need to do. I was meant to be doing a board games and beer gardens afternoon day, but unfortunately the person I was meeting to do that has caught COVID. So we might be doing something online instead, which would be cool, but we'll see what happens. I feel exhausted just saying all that. So you probably got an idea of what I'm feeling like in this. But yeah, that's kind of where I am with it all. It's exciting. It's very good, and I'm pleased with where I'm at. But it's now just carrying on going. And at some point, I will take a holiday. But until that point, we'll figure it out and keep going. So thank you very much for tuning in, everyone. I really appreciate it, and I will speak to you again in a week. Thank you very much.